Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Roadmaster diode wiring for a 2017 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited. Now the diode kit is going to be available in a few different configurations. You can get it with no connection up front, you can get a 4-pole as well as one with a 6-pole. Now if you opt for the 6-pole, you're going to be able to pick from a few different options of your umbilical, and you can get a straight cable, a hybrid cable as you see with both, or one that is coiled throughout. Now there's going to be 5 main components that you need to flat tow your vehicle. First one is going to be the base plate, and what that's going to do is attach to the frame of the vehicle and create the connection point for our tow bar. And that's going to be our next one, which is going to be our connection point between the vehicle and the actual RV. Now moving along, we're also going to have our safety chain loops here, and that's going to keep the vehicle attached to the tow bar and RV in case of an accidental disconnect. And that way you don't have a vehicle just rolling down the highway. Going along with that, you also need your supplemental braking system, which is required in a lot of states. And you're going to have a breakaway switch here, and that's going to bring the vehicle to a stop in case of an accidental disconnect. And you also have your diode wiring. And what that's going to do is transmit the turn signals, brake lights, and running lights from your RV to your towed vehicle. So that's going to allow people behind you to know when you're signaling, braking, or just driving at nighttime. They're going to see that vehicle. Now there may be a 6th component, and that in this case is going to be a high-low adapter. And the reason being is you want the height of your RV to your tow vehicle to be within a window of less than 3 inches. And the way to determine that is you're going to measure the center of the hitch pin hole to the ground, and then the center of the hole here on our base plate to the ground, and take those, subtract it, and if you are greater than 3 inches, you're going to want to pick up the high-low adapter that brings it under that 3-inch threshold. We'll start our installation by taking our wire, and I've just put a little bit of electrical tape here where we're actually going to have our electrical connections later on, and that way it's not going to move around as I pull the wires back, because we are going to have to get back to our taillights. So the main thing I did is try to stay away from any hot or moving parts, and also use a lot of the factory wiring. So let's go ahead and trace this. Gone ahead and used our crossbar here to just kind of zip up. We'll be following the 4 colored wires here, and this is just going to taper up, and I've gone ahead and looped it up over the front sway bar. So using a lot of the factory wiring, I just kind of put a zip tie every couple foot or maybe 16 inches just to make sure that it's holding up in place, or any turns or bends also helps. Now at this point I went over where the actual engine mount is, and it is kind of close to the exhaust here, but kind of left with not many options, and there is a factory wire loom that I've attached to up there. Gone ahead and just kind of continued it along. And then also to make it a little bit easier, I kind of routed it up over on the frame rail. That way I could work on the outside of the vehicle, kind of just drape this along. You do have your fuel tank as well as some more wire loom to attach to up top, which is good. And just kind of made my way to the back here. And then I've gone ahead and just routed up over the fuel tank and over this shock mount here. That way it's not in the way of anything moving. And then I just continued on over to our rear cross member here. And again, this is the heat shield, so that should protect a lot of that wiring, and just I followed it along. And then once we got to this back passenger corner here by this bumper mount, I went ahead and split off our wires. So we're going to have our white wire, which is going to be our ground, and that honestly can be grounded anywhere along this run. So if you wanted to peel the wire back and attach it, that's fine. I'm going to actually go ahead and I'll ground it somewhere under here. I've also routed off a green, and that's going to go to your right turn signal. I've also ran the brown as well, and that's going to be just for our taillights and brake lights, and that's actually going to need to jumper over, which I'll show you. That leaves us with our jumper wire as well as our yellow, which is going to go over to our driver's side. Now we can actually route our wires up behind the taillights, and to take your taillights off, you're going to have 4 Phillips head screws, so just go ahead and remove those, and this should separate pretty easily. Now this one has had some wire splicing into it previous, so from the factory yours is going to look a little bit different, and I'm going to show you what that will look like, as they just added a jumper harness onto here. But what you're going to have is going to be something like this. And so what you're going to do is simply push on this clip. Sometimes these can be a little tricky to separate, but it should separate like that. and that's going to give us our wires here, and these are going to be the ones we're going to tie into with our spade connectors. Now I've actually gone ahead and tested for our brake light as well as our turn signal, and we've determined on our driver's side that we're going to have white with orange, and that's going to be our brake light and turn signal light, and then our running light is going to be our green. So we're going to want to actually keep these kind of separated, and sometimes there's going to be a little insulation wrapped around these wires. I would say go ahead, peel that back as far as you can. It's going to make it a lot easier to not only get these installed, but also to actually have room to move around to plug this back in later on. You can see I have a yellow and a brown wire. These were the ones that I ran across from our passenger side, and the yellow is going to be your left turn signal, and the brown is actually a jumper wire that's going to go from both sides of the vehicle. So on this side I'll just be making the simple connection, but when we go back to the passenger I'll show you where I've actually doubled those up in a spade connector. So we'll be splicing into these, and the way it kind of works is I'll be cutting our orange here, the white with orange, and that's going to be a brake and turn signal. So that's going to take one of the diodes, and then our running lights will be the other diode. And really what it's going to do is kind of sit in the middle here. So we're going to have one portion of the wire once we cut it here, the other one on the other side. And this is going to be where we tie in our actual wires that we've ran in. So it's going to be pretty easy here, and I'm going to walk you through these steps. So first I'm going to go ahead, remove our spade clips, as we are going to need to have those loose to be able to attach this. And then I'll just go ahead and make the cut here. Now again, I do try my best to kind of go far back away from the plug. That way when you are plugging it back into the taillight, you have a little bit more room to work with. The Jeeps are a little bit easier because you do have a nice big pocket here. You don't have to worry too much. But we'll just go ahead and just strip these back a little bit. So we'll put our spade connector on there, and then we're going to crimp this down. Now with all of these connections, I always go back and just kind of give it a light tug just to make sure it's not going to fall out. Sometimes if our crimp's not on there properly, that can cause it to be loose, and that's going to cause us a little issue later on if we have to troubleshoot why the lights aren't working. So I have both ends of our brake and turn signal wire with spade connectors, so the out is always going to face towards the plug that goes to the tail light. So we can go ahead and attach that, and then I'm going to go ahead and attach this up top, which leads us to one more wire that needs to attach here. And this is going to be, since it's our brake and turn signal here, this is going to be the yellow, which is going to be for our left turn signal. So I'll go ahead, get our spade connector on here, attach it, and that'll be one diode down. And it does kind of get tight here with these spade connectors, so just make sure you actually are going inside in the middle. It's easy to actually slide above or below that clip, but once you have that in place. So now that we've got this one attached, we're going to go ahead and do the same process on our green wire here, and our brown wire is going to go where the yellow one is. So we'll go ahead and make those connections real quick. So I've gone ahead and I've just zip tied the diodes together here. I've got all my plugs back together. So now I can actually just plug our taillight back in and get this all buttoned up, and then we'll meet up on the passenger side. So here on our passenger side, it's going to be pretty similar. Our running light is going to be purple and white, and so I've gone ahead and attached those. Now here you're going to see the yellow spade connector here with the two brown wires. So our brown wire we attached on the other side. This is just going down and meeting up with the rest of the wire that runs to the front. So this is where it jumpers in. So it doesn't really matter which side you do it on, but your brown is going to need to connect to both the diodes. Now on the other one here, you can see that we have our green. That's the wire that we ran up for our right turn signal and our brake light, and that's going to go to our yellow and white. So we'll go ahead and make those connections there. We've gone ahead and zip tied this back up, and then now we can just attach our taillight and get this back in place. So now that we have all of our lights and wires buttoned up, we still need to do our ground wire here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just cut this, because I know that I can mount somewhere up here on our chassis to get a good ground. And we're going to be attaching a ring terminal on here, and that's going to be supplied in the kit. And then we'll be using a self-tapping screw. We're going to drill into the chassis. So you want to make sure you find a nice spot that's going to be part of the actual frame. Now you don't need to get too tight, just as long as that ring terminal isn't sliding around like this. So I'm going to give it one or two more bumps here, and that should be good. Now, with this wire harness, you actually have your 4-pole on here, and most times when you're flat towing a vehicle, this will need to be a 6-pole as the RV is going to be a 7. So a lot of times you're going to have your umbilical that's going to go from the 6 to the 7. So here we have supplied with our tow bar our 6-pole connection. So we're going to go ahead and get these connected into this real quick. So I'll start by cutting these. So I'm just going to go and kind of strip these back a little bit. Now, this customer is using the Roadmaster Nighthawk tow bar, and that's a very nice tow bar, but depending on what you are picking up, yours may or may not come with this. Ours did, so we will be using this. And if yours does not, or you need to pick one of these up, we actually have a bunch of these here at eTrailer that you can pick from. Now, before we make our connections, you're going to want to take the rubber boot that's on the back side of the plug, and you're going to slide this up. And that's just going to create a nice seal on it later, but we'll need to come back to here, and you're going to see there's going to be little Phillips screws on all of these little terminals. So what we'll do is we're going to just back these out just enough to where they're still in there, but it's going to open this gap up for us to put our wires in. I really suggest doing this in a nice clean spot just in case one of these drops, because you will need them to make the connection and they are hard to find. So also don't back them out all the way. And molded onto the plug, there's going to be some letters, and that's going to tell us where we actually need to run our wires. So the first one I'll look for is going to be our ground, and that's going to be our white wire. And so that's going to go into the spot labeled GD. So to get this in place, I'm simply just going to kind of twist this up, put our GD slot, we'll slide that in there. And then once your wire's in place, hold that, and then you're going to want to just tighten this down. You don't have to get too crazy, but just make sure it's snug. And then we're going to continue on. So I'm going to do my green and yellow here. So our yellow is going to be our left turn signal. So molded on here should be LT. Next, we're going to do our green, which is going to be our right turn signal, so RT. And last, we have our brown, and this is going to be our tail markers. So this is going to go into TM. Now, you are going to have two that are unused. If you are running a charge line, which allows your vehicle's battery to charge while flat towing, that's going to go into this center one. That's going to be the 12-volt auxiliary. So now that we have this connected, I'm going to be using a test box to hook up to this and run our light signals on the vehicle just to make sure they're working. If you don't have a test box, you can actually hook this up to your RV with your umbilical and run the turn signals and the brake lights as well as the running lights on the RV and see if they correspond to the back of the vehicle. We'll start with our taillights. Next, we're going to do our left turn signal. Then we'll do our brake lights. And then finally, our right turn signal. With everything tested and working properly, we can go ahead, we can slide our boot on here. And a lot of times I'll actually make sure that we have a little bit of silicone in these little connections here. And that's just going to kind of protect it over time. And then our boot is going to keep water from getting in here. And what I do is I just go back with a little electrical tape, wrap this around and around here. That way it's nice and sealed up. From there, we're just going to take our self-tapping screws and mount it into here. And that was a look and installation of the Roadmaster diode wiring kit for a 2017 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited.